It is a messenger that's telling you that something is not right in your life and that you need to shift. And maybe that is the diet, and maybe that is that you need a prescription, but maybe it's also that you need to change and shift the way that you view everything.
Hi, I'm Linus Woods Mullins, and I love to help women to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. So come on, let's vibe.
I'm so excited to be introducing to you Dayna Wilder. She's an energy healing practitioner, author, and guide devoted to helping people reconnect with their bodies and to help them to rediscover their inner capacity for healing. After years of living in a state of disconnection shaped by trauma, chronic stress, and nervous system dysregulation, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And the rest of the story I will let her tell. But thank you so much for being here on the Vibe Living podcast. It's wonderful having you here today.
Thank you so much for making this space too and having this conversation because I feel like this can be a bit isolating, not just for people like me that suffered with a disease, but for just people that are having this time and age in their life right now where a lot of our identity is shifting and our maybe our health, our priorities, our energy level. And it's really important actually that we find a space where we can talk about this and normalize it and also find solutions to it. So thank you so much for having me today.
You're absolutely right. I've been doing podcasting around these topics for, oh no, I don't know, about 16 or 17 years. And still and yet, while I've seen some improvement about our awareness of what really is going to be happening with us as we begin to age, it is still a big mystery. And almost, I kid you not, every day I talk to someone who said, I'm glad to finally find somebody who can validate what I'm feeling because my doctor told me that this isn't really happening to me, that, or I'm too old, or I'm too young. I'm too young to have started menopause, or I'm too old to do anything about it, that I don't need HRT and just all kinds of things. And the reality is, the aging experience is a very personal one. And going through any kind of unwellness, any kind of chronic disease, whatever, is a very personal one because everybody is different. So please share with us what your experience was and how you came to talk about the philosophy that you've developed as a result of your experience.
Yeah, so I developed MS 17 years ago, and my MS was something that I can see now in hindsight almost had to come into being. I had so much trauma in my life, and I disconnected on so many levels. And as you mentioned in my bio, this escapism. So I very much tried to not live in my body because I didn't like who I was. I didn't like my circumstances. And to be honest, it wasn't always safe to be in the environment I was in. So I dissociated myself very frequently. And my body ended up mirroring my life around me. And my body actually disconnected my mind and body. Because anyone who's not familiar with MS, it actually eats the nervous system. So communication stops working. So I ended up actually living in the very reality that I had been trying to create in my younger years. Except now I was older, a little wiser, and I had a little more insight, but I was forced now into this scenario, which I then had to unpack and unlearn in order to heal myself. And although I don't really like to call it a protocol or a framework, because I think we're holistic. And I think that you don't need to do this one step at a time. This is something that you do all of these things simultaneously as they evolve. It just happened that my own journey followed this type of a ladder almost. And I didn't realize it until later reading yoga philosophy that the five koshas or layers of our body very much represented how it unfolded healing for me. So just to give some kind of reference there, the five koshas or your bodies are five layers of your body that have concentric, more subtle layers. So we start with our physical body, and which is the one we believe it's even though it's an illusion, it is where we live most of the time and we get wrong most frequently. And then we move inward and we get to an energy body. And it starts to get a little harder to understand, but I think the easiest way is when people think of like acupuncture or meridians, chi, the prana, right? The vitalizing life force within us. And then we get more internal to that still into our mental body. And then to where that mental data turns into wisdom And that gets a little finer and a little more refined, which pairs with getting older too. We get a little wiser as we grow. And then eventually we want to reach this bliss body. And the bliss body here, though, it's not the same way I applied it when I was younger, where it was like, oh, if you're partying or you're having fun or you're in a hot date, or these are like these hedonistic body pleasures of bliss. This is more about finding a centerness in yourself. One of the ways I like to think about it is like almost like you start to live in the eye of the storm where you're in the center and it's perfectly still and quiet there, even though chaos might externally happen around you. Because certainly as we get older, life doesn't quiet down for a lot of us. Like we get sandwiched in, at least in my age right now, with teenagers on one end, older parents on the other, still have a career, but I also am perimenopause and I'm also have a disease and I have bills and life is stressful. And so it's can you live in a place that all of that content is still happening around you. But the context in which you live, you understand that happiness is an inside job and you work from the inside out. And then this now you become the creator of your reality as opposed to just the victim of the story and all the things that have happened to you.
Yeah, that's so much aligned to what I was talking about earlier in terms of sometimes women feel so overwhelmed that they really do feel like victims only because, first of all, the lack of awareness of what's going on and also the lack of solutions to deal with it, or the solutions that they're given aren't necessarily working because it deals with symptoms and not causation. And when you take a look at your experience, what was it that you began to do differently to basically turn your situation around?
I think that it started even just from my diagnosis when the doctors told me, like, I'm in Canada, and so we have free healthcare, but it takes a really long time to get things done. So from the time that I was getting an MRI or something was wrong to when I finally got an MS diagnosis and doctor, I had a lot of time to think about it and research and do my own work. And I never really believed them when they told me this was going to be a chronic progressive and 10 years I'm going to be in a wheelchair. I think I knew right then in that moment that their solution wasn't acceptable to me and that I was going to find some way to do something different because I really, I think, fundamentally understood that I wasn't born sick. I was healthy at one point and I got sick, which meant that I could get well again. And I just needed to figure out what that was. And the doctor saying, we're going to give you these very dangerous drugs that suppress your immune system and make you very sick in a different way. I didn't understand how that was ultimately going to heal me. And it wasn't even, it was a short term, say, with the cancer where you're going to do one round and then hopefully you get better. With the MS, they were going to do this to me for the rest of my life. And I thought that doesn't really seem like health to me. And so I started working on my own and I started with meditation and with yoga and I started to try to overcome. I did a lot of diet, exercise, but it was all still really in the biochemistry realm, in the physical body. I wasn't really doing, because even the yoga meditation, being a yoga teacher now, it's hard to look back and say, but I wasn't really doing it right still then. I wasn't doing it as a spiritual path. I didn't understand the purpose really behind it. I was doing it more as a to-do list. Did I eat organics today? Check. And I went running. And it was all this still in my mind, something I had to overcome. It was a task. And it wasn't until later that I learned maybe you need to start just being with yourself as opposed to giving yourself more pressure, that there's more things that are wrong, more things to do now. But I think the real turning point was probably experiencing my first energy device from the outside that was giving energy to the body. And that was pulse magnetic field therapy, or PEMF. And it is a device that it puts frequency through magnetic fields into the body and it charges the voltage of your cell. And it just turned the lights back on for me. And I started to realize, okay, my body is not sustaining energy. Something needs to be done. But it was still an external thing that I was being given to me, and I still use that in my practice with people. It's beautiful. But I then had to get to another layer because I'm like, why is my body not sustaining the energy? So I need to do something else. And that's how these layers come to be, because I was like, what is it that is energy leaking out of me? So I'm putting energy in even externally through these devices, which helps short term, but why am I not sustaining still? And that's when I started to get a little higher up where it's what energetically in your emotions and in your subconscious and in your limiting beliefs, like what was the thoughts that made you get sick? Because your beliefs influence how you experience events and how you think about them. And the thoughts then turn into an emotion. And the emotion then turns into chemistry in the body which then causes either a place for healing or a place for dis-ease to occur. And so what was I thinking? What was I doing that was creating this environment where my energy was constantly leaking? And this is when you get into now things like other kinds of maybe hypnotherapy, neurolinguistic programming, somatic work, breath work, where you're trying to really get your mindset and your emotional body, your nervous system regulated.
I know my audience is listening to all this and says, wow, this really sounds good, but it's overwhelming. So, if you were talking with someone who got a recent diagnosis like you did and knew that there was something else that needed to be done before they just laid down and accepted that diagnosis, what would be the first step? In other words, what was your first step to arrive at that? And the reason why I ask that is one of the things that I hear from my clients that have never done any kind of meditation before is that they're so wired yet tired that it's difficult for them to even calm their nervous system down enough to stop to meditate. So, how can you go from having been recently diagnosed with a disease that scares you to death based upon what your doctors might have told you, and to the fact where you are still, you're tired, but you're wired, and you can't even calm down to do the one thing that perhaps your coach or maybe your functional practitioner outside your doctor told you to do, get quiet and meditate? How do you arrive at that?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways to answer that. So the first part would be that you have to take radical responsibility for the situation you're in. So, regardless if you want to do the pharmacological approach, and I don't judge people for whatever choice they make because we're all, and I also believe whatever you believe will work for you because it's a lot in your mind. So, if you even, but regardless if you're going to take that path or not, you still need to add in other lifestyle and other modifications in order to start healing. So, I think that we all need to start instead of seeing ourselves as victimized and even the disease itself as being victimized by this disease. Start to see it as communication and a signal. It is a messenger that's telling you that something is not right in your life and that you need to shift. And maybe that is the diet. Maybe that is that you need a prescription, but maybe it's also that you need to change and shift the way that you view everything. And giving that, telling people that you're responsible for your disease, this is not to like make people have a more shame or guilt, because that's the kind of emotions that make you sick to begin with. It's just to give somebody a frame where they're going to start to show up for themselves every day and put effort into themselves. And this self-care, and especially I think now thinking about like women of this age, that maybe we feel a little bit guilty when we do those things because we get low on our list and we have poor boundaries. We say yes when we mean no a lot of the time. And that is to really honestly also give yourself permission to care for yourself. Because if you are not doing it for yourself, like how are you going to continue to care for your parents as they get older or your children? Because they don't need less as they get older, they need more. Though now you have to pay university and now they have bigger financial problems and worries. And we have now this disease with us too. So we have to now figure out a way to just simplify things. And I know that meditation, although I know it is foundational and transformative, for people who are, like you're saying, wired, it's very hard to sit down and meditate. So to suggest that you're going to just sit down in lotus pose and you're going to meditate for 40 minutes is not realistic. But you start in very small ways. So one of my favorite, easiest practices to give people is gratitude. And again, everything is consistency. So you don't go to the gym one time and then get a bikini body. You go every day and show up. And this kind of mindful practices, it's the same thing. So I integrate it where I do it every night at dinner with my family. So in the past, we would have all come home and this is where we unload our day. And people would complain about what happened at work or at school and we're all really commiserating negative energy to each other. And instead, I'm like, now we do 5 things we're grateful for. And it immediately shifts the energy. So again, when I'm saying that even the energy turns into physical things, you digest your food better. As you're practicing gratitude, you now have parasympathetic is activated. So now your immune system can rebuild. And now you digest your food better. And now you have better energy in the body for your heart rate to regulate and for your temperature, all of the things that your body to heal all the cells. And it's such a small practice, but it's really transformative. And then once you start it, it's almost like exponentially grows. Because I remember laying and on the floor when I was really sick at one point and I couldn't walk and I couldn't see and I was being cared for entirely. And all I could really do was be in my head and meditate. And I started practicing gratitude and not as a way of, I don't want people to think of it as like toxic positivity. I'm not telling you to not have the bad emotions or to have bad days or to feel your pain. Actually, I think you should feel them and let them move through you. But don't stay stuck in them. Don't ruminate on them. Don't create a victim story that when you wire, you fire it together, where you're constantly complaining about something and feeling negative. You want to reframe life. So even in those moments, I would lay there and I think there's still something to be grateful for. I'm still breathing. And as long as I'm breathing, there's still possibility. I still have a mind that's working that's going to help me find a solution. I have a floor to lay on. I have a warm temperature in the room. I have a roof over my head. And I could just start to go on and on. I thought there's always another side to everything. And even your disease, even if it's your aging now or your life circumstance, there's always still something, like you mentioned in the beginning of this, that there it's not being done to you, it's being done for you. And as long as you can reframe your situation to give it
I
this
just
positive.
thought of that word reframe. In midlife, especially, you do a lot, or we should be doing a lot of reframing because our brain cannot disseminate between right and wrong. It's going to do whatever you tell it to do in terms of trying to support you in whatever you're going through. So if you start reframing things in a way that is more of not toxic positivity, but seeing things in a different light, then how it impacts you begins to change as well. And I was going to ask you when it comes to this whole mental piece, I know that gratitude is very important because it does clear space, being able to say what you're thankful for and also being able to get data dump or get out of the negative things that happened. It clears space in order for you to be able to get, I feel, more blessings to come. But when that happens, how much do you think your intuition and your internal wisdom kicks in to aid you during this whole process?
Absolutely. So this is why I still love the framework of the koshas, because I believe that our wisdom and our bliss, which is where we find the intuition, discernment, where we get our the instinct and we get that knowledge from our higher self, right? If you whether we call it soul, spirit, source, the unified field, where that information disseminates down to us, it's very quiet. It doesn't compete with social media. It doesn't compete with traffic and high stress jobs. It doesn't compete with the bills. And then you add on now from all that stress in the body, now you also have pain and you have tightness and you're sore, or you might have arthritis, or you have all these other things going on. And they're so loud, those signals, that you don't really get to hear the quietness of your true self speaking, the wisdom coming. And so I believe that we start, and this is why I still start with people in the physical body, is we start to take the veils off. So take out the toxic food. Start to drink clean sources of water. Start to learn how to breathe from your diaphragm so that you're bringing energy and a lot of oxygen into the body, right? Because even as you do those practices, things like now moving into the energy body, where in yoga we call it pranamaya kosha, prana being breath control. So even now it gets easier to do breath practices once your diaphragm is physically moving better, and maybe practicing like yoga or fascia release, things that release the tension in the body. Because as we create a taller spine and a more open body, the energy moves better. And when the energy moves better and our nervous system can regulate and feel safety signals, it's easier for our mind to get safety signals now up from the body. And because the body and the mind you're not separable. As the body is safer, the mind gets safety signals, and it's easier now to adjust your framework to now communicate back to the body in a new way. I'm safe now. I'm okay now. And maybe those things you couldn't protect yourself at 7 in your life, and maybe the things that overwhelm when you were a teenager, you have resources now, right? Like you're wiser now in our 40s and later than we were when we were younger. And so now we have the power to use our mind to calm down. But once we do all of that and we regulate our emotions and we reframe things, we can meditate a little bit more. We can do these practices of stillness and be okay to just sit with ourselves a little more. Like
I
I
also think when it comes to the healing process and trying to approach things in a different way, taking incremental steps Small changes, one by one, can add up to a big result. As we grow older, I feel some of those monumental big things that change your life, wow, right away, that happens a lot as you're younger because you're still gaining life experience. But as you get older, maybe you have, I wouldn't say less aha moments, but they come to you in a different way. It might come from incremental experiences because we've experienced a lot already. And it seems like to me, it's the baby steps, it's the incremental things that happen that gets you from one place to another. And when I think about your story and the things that you've been through, what was the incremental step that really took you to the other side of your disease? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I'm going to say that I'm going to pick yoga probably as my biggest one. And not because that one is the one I even practice the most or because it was the most dramatic, but it's what you're saying, it was incremental. Because when I
Mm,
first started practicing yoga, I practiced when I was a runner. And yes, I had MS, but I was still doing marathons. So my MS didn't really affect me yet. And yoga was very much like this Western style yoga of like yoga pants, yoga studio, yoga body. It was very still much the thing I was doing and almost like competing with myself. Can I get deeper in a back bend? Can I get a more fancy pose? And it wasn't until later when I started to like really pick up the meaning of it and really get more into the breath work and to realize really yoga means meditation and union. And as I studied that and I got into more things, I understood that we really are this oneness and vibration and frequency. And each one of those things led me to a new modality, to a new insight into something else. And even the way, like, I still teach yoga now to in a studio, but I teach it now through sound and meditation, barely any poses. So we'd have a talk just like this, but whatever the group needs to talk about for 10 minutes or so. And then because I have a lot of people that have high anxiety coming, and I only meet with them once a month, maybe, so we're not working daily. We do some meditation just to calm the system down. But I find what you were saying before, it's very difficult for people who are in high anxiety and high overdrive to calm down. So my favorite tool that I found now is to use sound bath and to use sound tools because sound is auto acoustatory. So just like us listening right now, it gives that left analytical language, task oriented part of our brain. It gives it something to listen to because especially say for the crystal singing bowl, there's so many overtones in it. And especially when you're playing multiple bowls, it's such a journey for that part of your brain to try to comprehend and listen to that it gives a perfect space for the subconscious or the female, the stillness, the space, the relationships, the all the in between of thinking. It
it's
gives
really
it
like
opportunity.
audio comfort food. That's what I call sound healing. It's like audio comfort food. And it's really interesting because in this phase of life, our parasympathetic nervous system, our nervous system in general, is just very sensitive. It's amazing. I'm learning more and more about that for myself. I'm not really, I don't know what you call the stage I'm at. I'm 68. So I don't know if I'm like midlife. That would mean I'd live to be 136. So I don't know where I am, but I know I'm in that throw because menopause never ends. Once you're there, you just have different components of it. And one of the things that I've learned and where I've arrived is that my parasympathetic nervous system definitely needs to be addressed. And that helps to calm me down from that wired but tired kind of way of being. And one of the things that I have learned is not just the power of sound and frequency, but even the fact that there are things we can do within ourselves sound wise. Are you familiar with the whole theme of humming and how that
Yes. So first of all, I just want to say whatever you're doing a fantastic job because you are vibrant and radiant. So you
Oh,
look fantastic for your age. You can see the energy just coming out of you.
oh, okay,
Um,
thank you.
but you know what? Actually, for my sound bath, we end every single time by doing vocal toning or chanting. And
Mhm.
the reason is because even though I have very fancy frequency devices, PEMF, microcurrent, biofeedback, I do all of these things on top of sound healing, but they all cost money and they all require people to come to see me. And not everybody has access to do that all the time or the desire to do. I like, even in my sound bath classes, I like to give somebody something you could do at home for free because the goal of healing really is for you to implement it into daily practice. And your voice is your best sound healing tool you have. And also because after we do sound bath and everybody's cozy with eye masks on, they're sleepy. So it's hard to get everybody up at 8 o'clock at night. And I'm like, is it even safe to drive now? How sleepy everybody is after we just did sound bath for an hour. So when we tone and we vibrate, it is hitting your vagus nerve, which is running from the brain stem and down into the enteric nervous system, which is controlling heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, all of these other things. And this is can really get out of whack. And there is like a gut brain axis here too, where if you have problems with digestion, you can have bacteria that's running up the vagus nerve and going into the brain, which does now cause anxiety and depression. This is why when I say they separate mind and body, it's ridiculous. Like it's all one whole thing.
It really
But
is.
humming, though, is so beautiful to practice, and not just for the vibration of humming, which has been shown to entrain the brain. So, whenever you want to get back into like theta and delta waves, or gamma, really for advanced meditators, but those kind of lower brainwave states are where we have like creative solutions and we feel calm and we get into flow state. But even more than just the humming for that kind of vagal toning, I actually believe that words are also frequency. So when we speak or we think language, that word has a lot of power behind it. It casts a spell when we spell a word, right? Like the etymology of words is very fascinating to me. And when we chant, especially in Sanskrit, Sanskrit is the original language that was spoken. It has no dialects, it's never been rewritten, and it's still spoken today. And I think that's amazing, that language, and that there's so many variations of saying one thing. So when you chant Sanskrit language, you're also not just toning on the vibrational cellular level, you're also like making an intention. You're also speaking something into existence. So I think that's also really powerful intention to do. And then overall, just to be very mindful, not just of our thoughts, but of what we say to ourselves, what we say to other people, because language is really powerful. And the words do turn into emotions, they do turn into things. And so I think not outside of just even chanting, using our voice just intentionally is very important for healing and for just society in general.
I definitely agree. So now you've used and come to know all these things in the process of facilitating healing within yourself. How are you doing now?
I I believe actually that I know that you're in trouble if you say that you're cured. I actually believe that I am cured. And it's not even because I have 100% function again. Like I took a lot of damage from my last relapse. I'm not running a marathon again. And honestly, I wouldn't anyway. Because one of the things I think about aging now is I look at fitness in an entirely different way. I think it's good enough to just go for a hike with the dog in nature. Then I think I need to pound the pavement or get my reps in. So I might not be where I was before, but it's actually not even my goal. Like I actually that's not even on my list to do.
I think that after 40, and especially after 50, how you stay engaged physically and in terms of staying in shape or movement really does begin to change anyway, because you don't necessarily want to do the go hard workout in the gym kind of thing like you used to do when you were in your 20s and 30s. Something like yoga can be just as cardiovascular because of the positions and things that you have to hold. You still move, you still do things, but you just do things differently based upon what your body needs.
And I also find that that you have to really like it too.
Yes.
If you're not gonna show up for yourself if you don't enjoy it, and also I feel like because I am an energy healer, that everything I do has to either give me energy or it depletes my energy. And the idea now of wanting to go out and run behind exhaust of cars through the city, that actually feels draining to me. I don't know why I used to enjoy it different time in life. To me now, when I think about going out and listening to the birds and being near water and I'm watching my dog play, that gives me so much. Even just thinking about it now, as I'm thinking about it, it's already bringing me joy. And so, you know what? That is going to be way more meaningful exercise because my body is going to be present in the moment. It's going to be connected. And even my own healing, and this is when I say that I'm healed now, even though outwardly my physical abilities might look like I'm not all the way healed. I feel like as my body broke down, that my heart healed because all the things, the lessons I needed to learn that I wasn't letting, my mind wasn't doing the work for me to make boundaries and to have needs and to have my identity and my purpose. So my body spoke up for me very loudly. And in doing so, it made me address all the other parts of my life that weren't working. And now I have such a happy relationship and I have such support. And I also know how to ask for help now. And I know how to accept it willingly. And I know how to also say no. and I have boundaries now. And so my heart is so full now that any bit of my body that still needs to catch up in healing, I already know it will. I'm already so grateful for it because it's definitely coming. There's no way that you can live in this high vibe and this love and then not eventually have a body that matches it. It's just my body's just catching up and I'm patient with it and I love it and I'm going to give it its own space and time to do that.
I love that. That's wonderful. And my wish is that everybody could arrive to that. And I'm so grateful that you're here today. And thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, if you take a look at the show page, you will see a link to her book, Unlearn Disease. Relearn well-being. And here she's going to be sharing there. She shares practical and compassionate frameworks for healing and thriving based on the five koshas that she talked about. And I'm telling you, it's just fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to leave everybody just with hope and inspiration that regardless of where you are right now, physically or on your journey, everything is possible. And you just need to start with your mind frame and your belief, and everything else will follow.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for listening. What an amazing podcast we've had today. And I don't want you to miss the opportunity to listen to all the other, I think it's 170 some odd podcasts that are here. You can listen to it on the current platform or any of your favorite listening platforms. Five Living Podcast is really for women over 40 who are ready to awaken to the possibilities of their life, that they can be vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. They can vibe. Thanks so much for being here today. Have a fantastic day. And don't forget to vibe. Bye bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Vibe Living Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this podcast. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye bye, everybody.